All right. Brian Luebben, my man, super excited to have you on the show today. You are quite the rage in the Instagram world with your Action Academy podcast, your Action Academy group. You are traveling, you're living life, you're creating a cool little community for yourself. And I'm really excited to have you on the show, man, because you are one of the people that I would say right now is like a true professional podcaster. And we don't honestly have a lot of true professional podcasters on the show. So excited to dive into all you're doing, all you're about, how a lot of that relates to real estate business and everything in between. So I appreciate you coming on, man.
Dude, thanks so much for having me, man. It's been a long time coming, and I'm excited. I've already had you on our show, the Action Academy podcast, and we're going to do another one here coming up at in person here in Austin, Texas, here in a couple of weeks. So that's going to be an absolute blast. And man, yeah, it's been a fun ride, and I have built up the muscle of saying no to a lot of things.
Yeah.
And if we want to start anywhere, we can start with my intro here in a second. But if there's a tactic or a strategy that we want to lead out the gate with, it'd be, saying yes takes you to the million, saying no takes you to 10 plus.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So that's what I'm saying no to right now. I'm saying no to multifamily syndications left and right. I'm saying no to land flips. I'm saying no to wholesales. I'm saying no to business opportunities. I'm keeping my one thing. And sometimes it's much easier said than done. And that's what we're doing right now. So I'll pause right there. We can start wherever you want to start the story.
I mean, I definitely want to dive into that because, I've known you for a couple of years since Action Academy was relatively early on, which is pretty wild. And that is something that you've done very well, which I think is super applicable to people that are trying to grow real estate businesses, right? Is especially being involved in GoBundance, having your own group, you are exposed to tons of different opportunities all the time. And you've been very good at saying no and choosing which things are actually going to get you the highest ROI. So I know that's been 2 years in the making for you. I definitely want some time on that. But first off, just give us a little bit rundown of your background, kind of what you do, why you were doing what you're currently doing.
Cool. Yeah. So we'll do it over the next 27 minutes, guys, and then we'll knock it out of the next 2 minutes, guys. We're all podcasters over here. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening right now, what we're going to do is really go over systems, processes, automations, delegations, how you guys could be wheeling and dealing in your own real estate businesses today. So hopefully we'll earn the next 30 to 60 minutes with you, and you'll leave Mike and Dana 5-star rating and a review that they very much so deserve. My name is Brian Luebben, and the beginning, I graduated college, went into a Fortune 500 sales organization, corporate America, got the golden handcuffs to a degree where I was making $250,000 a year in my early 20s. Things were great. Life was good until it was no longer. I looked at my boss's boss, which I recommend as a first step for anybody that's listening to this show that is unsure if you want to stay in that job or if you want to leave. I saw who that person was, and although great guy, nicest guy, did not want his lifestyle. Unhealthy, face full of donuts, Zoom calls every 15 minutes. I said, if I work my ass off for the next 5 years, you're telling me that I am going to have less freedom and work more hours. Not fun for me. And I was asking the questions along the lines of, how do I make 500,000? How do I make $1 million? How do I make 5 million? How do I make 10 million a year? And those options were not available to me in that current position. So I began to plan my escape. And what ended up ensuing is I would be buying real estate over the next couple of years. Very unsexy, the least sexy way to get started. I just bought a house a year, lived in one room, rented it out, did that for a couple of years, made a couple $1,000 a month off of that, started up a podcast because I said, well, holy shit, $4,000 a month and $20,000 a month. There's a difference here. Let me just go ask all these financially free millionaires how they got financially free. And maybe some of it will rub off on me by luck and chance, right? And so I started up the Action Academy podcast, started interviewing over now 579 multi-millionaires and a couple of billionaires. And it did, in fact, rub off. I started up a podcast business accidentally that ended up replacing that $20,000 a month income. Quit my job in March of 2022, and then did the next logical best thing, which is leave to go travel full-time around the world for 8 months, which is now what I currently do. Is half the time I'm in Austin, Texas, half the time I'm traveling as we build our new company from $0 to $10 million a year in top-line revenue.
Perfect.
Dang, that's a lot in 3 minutes.
We got to narrow it down, man. I like to just keep it short and sweet. And whenever we take it woo-woo, we bring it down into the tactics, man. We got it rehearsed.
You said one thing I want to highlight, though, because it resonated a lot with me. And you're talking about looking at your boss's boss. If you spent any time in corporate America, one thing you do realize is it's almost counterintuitive. The higher up you go, the more they own your soul, right? That your boss is in more meetings, your boss's boss is in more meetings. If you're a VP of a company, they expect you to be like living and breathing that business because, you are an essential person to that business. But in entrepreneurship, the higher up you go, the more successful you get, the less you have to be in your business, the less you have to give away your soul.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if we want to start somewhere, a cool place to start is what me and Mike were just talking about with like the perfect week exercise, because there's so many different strategies that you guys talk about on the show, which I resonate. And I'm a longtime listener of the show myself. So I know what you guys talk about, and we share so many different strategies. But one thing that is important across all of them is most entrepreneurs, especially the ones that even me and Mike, they don't, if you ask them, what's a perfect week look like for you in your business or in your personal life, they couldn't answer. And this is something that I just went through. And what happens is if you guys get and accomplish everything that you want, and maybe you build the wholesaling business or you buy cash flowing businesses or start a land flipping company or something like that, and then you get your freedom. If you don't establish that, what we're about to talk about, then you'll replace a 40-hour week work week with a 100-hour a week hellhole. And then you just wonder what happened. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, and the funny thing is I remember when you started exploring this, I don't know, maybe about a month ago, and you called me and you asked me what my perfect week was. And you're right, I didn't have an answer for you. Like, I have no idea at all. And I mean, to be fair, I'm somebody that likes working. I am somebody that gets a lot of fulfillment, especially because we are building, and I can see the exponential upside for the business, which I know you're experiencing right now as well. But after a while, it does start to burn out. And I think where it gets really tricky is when people are in that solopreneur phase, where they're not necessarily having asymmetrical upside for the work that they put in. And that is where people are in like that hourly mindset. They're not doing anything intentional to build out that perfect week. And so I guess from your perspective, as someone who has now done this, what is the best way to start with that? Are you looking at staff right away? Is it systematizing everything? Is it internal reflection? What are your strategies for figuring that out?
So first, I would start in the macro and kind of chisel your way down. So what I did, and like you just said, I called a couple people that were kind of in the trenches with me around the same revenue marks, because you guys are a couple steps ahead. And I'm like, okay, you're kind of right in the hunt with me. You're not doing $20 million a year where you have probably a manager and another level of management on top of that, right? So we're pretty in the trenches. So first things first is I'm like, what am I optimizing for? And that's a very, very important question that everybody on here needs to ask. And a lot of you guys are optimizing for cash, short-term cash inflections. Otherwise, you'd be doing a multifamily business. That's why you're flipping, wholesaling. You want that. You want that cash flow. So that's what we're going for. So for me, I want to optimize for heavy cash flow. The game of equity and the game of cash flow are two completely separate games. I'm not playing the equity game right now. I'm 100% unapologetically playing the game of cash flow. So I'm like, how do I generate as much as humanly possible? So that's number one. How do I generate cash flow as much as possible? Question number two is, how do I generate cash flow anywhere that I can operate a Mac and a mic? Anywhere with a Wi-Fi connection. Travel is insanely important to me. And when I do settle down, get married, have kids, that's also going to continue to be an important facet of our life is travel. So I am intentional today about building the systems and the processes that allow me to live that dream life later. So then what happens is now you have the vision of what you want it to be, so you can say yes and you can say no to different business opportunities and strategies. And then I begin to build the org chart that supports that. That's the difficult part that everyone skips across. They just talk about hiring a master operator, or it pisses me off. I'm going to get me a rock star, right? I want a rock. We'll just put a rock star operator. I'll buy this business. I'll just put a rock star in there. I'll start this wholesaling company. We'll just get a rock star in there. All right. So then I'm building out the org chart. And then it goes all the way down to the really, really difficult part, which is the reason that I called Mike. And it's a problem/puzzle that everyone on here is going to want to run into at some point in your business, which is delegate, automate. I'm doing this stuff. I did the thing. I built the systems. The team is running without me. What the hell do I do in my business? Mm-hmm. And so that is where I find myself, to where a friend of mine that had an exit from his company at 31 years old, he's sitting on $27 million in cash. And he gave a phrase to me that really shook me. And he goes, oh, dude, he's like, you're in optimize. You need to move to maximize. Mm-hmm. And I go, holy shit, what does that mean? And he goes, in the beginning, you build your systems, automations, and delegations to build the machine in your business that produces the result that you're looking for. And then you maximize the thing that you specifically are great at, the value that you specifically bring to the business. If that's making it rain, that's going to be sales for you. If it's marketing. So for me, that thing is podcasting. We did the numbers and we dissected every single revenue stream and every single marketing channel of our business. And we realized that when I statistically get on a podcast, then there is a 17% spike in intro calls the following week, every single time. And we compared that to every marketing channel. So how you guys can apply, and I'll get off my soapbox here listening, is in your wholesaling business, in your real estate business, dissect every single one of your lead generation channels, figure out which one is producing upsized returns, and quadruple down on that thing. Mm-hmm. And then watch how easy your life becomes. Same thing with your customers. Fire your worst ones, and then your best ones, your best leads, your best people, go 10 times on that type of customer.
Yeah. Yeah. That's super huge, right? And that's, it's impressive how much you know your numbers, especially with the way that you are doing your marketing and your brand, because it's so outward facing. Like when you're doing, wholesale marketing, right? It's very targeted. You're sending mail, you have like the outputs that you're sending, and then you can measure them coming back. So I guess are you just looking at booked calls? Are you looking at audience growth, kind of all the above?
So at the macro, we're looking at audience growth, which we call like top of funnel. And the same thing can apply to your real estate business. Anybody that's like, let's call a spade, and online presence helps you no matter what you're doing. Mm-hmm. With you guys too, as a funnel into the podcast, into the funnel of the ecosystem. The game in short is, how do I use short form to get eyeballs to my long form, which is podcast and YouTube, to actually build a relationship and form business partnerships at scale with my people. So that is what we do. We're not big on YouTube, but we're big on the podcast. And so all of the eyeballs that I generate are just to bring to my long form and actually provide value. And then at that point, we're looking at a couple of key metrics. We're looking at calls on calendar. We're looking at percent qualified calls. So we're looking at, okay, so we got a lead. What percent of these leads are qualified? And then what percent of qualified leads in general and gross leads close? Mm-hmm. So I'll tell you my numbers. 37.2% of gross leads close and 61.4% of qualified leads close. Mm-hmm. So a qualified lead constitutes as somebody that comes into our business and we submit an offer to them. We say, hey, you are a fit for what we do. Here's an invitation to join the group. And then so 61.4% of those people say yes. Nice. And so you just back the numbers. And then it goes all into cost of acquisition and cost of CAC, like cost to acquire a customer, which we can get into as well. It's the same thing with lead flow for your wholesale business.
I mean, it's literally the same model, right?
Same thing.
We have our cost per lead, cost per acquisition. Our average deal size will vary a little bit because yours is fixed. I know because you have your community. But no, that's really interesting. So when it comes to figuring that out, I guess, about yourself, you obviously came from a sales background. You went through kind of the phase of building it out. What would you recommend for somebody that is in kind of like that balance of where they're still probably wearing a lot of hats, and there's probably things that they can't necessarily measure quite like that, right? So like they're managing flips, they're managing their own rentals, they're doing their own acquisitions, they're setting up their own marketing and data. Maybe they have like a VA that helps or like a lead manager that helps set up some of those things. But do you think that they should be focusing on like their preference as well? Or is it purely just like they need to figure out how to do the numbers and that's kind of on them and that's part of being an entrepreneur?
I don't think you can escape the numbers. I think that you need to know your numbers. Show me a business owner that doesn't know his numbers and I'll show you a business owner that's going to fail.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Sure.
Because it's not, the numbers aren't something that you can delegate. There's 3 things. There's a wonderful book. I have it with me. A CEO Only Does 3 Things by Trey Taylor. Mm-hmm. And this is like an executive book. It was recommended to me by the CEO of Keller Williams, Mark Willis, and their entire C-suite reads this. But you can use this in your real estate business as well. So the 3 things a CEO does are set the vision, hire, attract, and retain top talent, and make sure that there's enough cash in the bank.
Yeah.
That's the only job of the CEO. So when you go back to, your hiring models, like this is, and I'm saying this not as someone, please guys, don't use me as an example of hiring mastery. Use me as an example of a guy that's going through the trenches right now. And I'm 2 steps ahead of y'all. Like I just am like really, really deep into this stuff right now. And it's really like dollar cost productive in my business. So for us, it starts with the vision for the company. So where are we taking this company? And then that is what attracts the talent in the beginning. And Gary Keller, like Keller Williams, I'm not related with Keller Williams whatsoever. I've never been an agent. I'm never going to be an agent, but I like how Gary Keller's brain works. And so he used a lot of his big philosophy in his business was reducing salary as much as possible and keeping as much compensation variable as he could. Because they bootstrapped the company. So that's what I do. And so for my first couple of hires, I needed to make sure that the vision of the company supported their vision and I could fit their vision within mine. And you guys can do that from square one with your companies. You can say, okay, I'm going to wholesale 2 houses, a year. Not many people are going to get on board. 2 houses a month, maybe. Okay, I want to do like 20 houses a month. You need to build a team for that. And you need to have an entire operation and you need to figure out what that is yielding to the partner that you're going to be partnering with. And so we start with that and then we build out the org chart next. And this is kind of the EOS traction model. I believe you guys run traction like EOS, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then EOS, then you build out your org chart and you say, okay, here's what I want my org chart to look like at the end of this year. Here's what I want it to look like at the end of 3 years. Here's what I want it to look like at the end of 5 years. And you put all those positions out and you say, here's how much that position should probably cost. And then you just back in the revenue that you need to produce to be able to afford those positions one by one. And then you wear all the hats in the beginning. And then at one by one, you delegate out the hats that you're not best at wearing first. So the first hat you probably delegate is admin, back of the house kind of stuff. And then it can start going into like lead generation and revenue generation positions. But I'll pause there. That's just what we did that worked for us.
That's a lot. Mike and I have gone through that process. So I know when you're saying it, I'm like, that's a lot of effort and work and you have to do it because it is critical.
Nobody talks about it.
I know it's not sexy, right? Org charts. Yeah. we all leave corporate America to get away from org charts, but in reality, you still need them. The question I have for you, because Mike and I have struggled with this in the past. I know others that are, especially when they're going from solopreneur to like entrepreneur. You had made a good point about variable compensation, which Mike and I are 100% on board with, especially like sales staff. You have to do that. But you also mentioned hiring admin staff out first. How have you, and do you have any advice for people on how can you do variable compensation for people that are not in a sales role or a revenue generating role? And is that a successful way to hire people or pay people?
Yeah. So admin, you're going to mess up 90 times. So hire virtual.
Sure.
And I'm not saying this as a knock on virtual staff. I have virtual staff that have been with me for a couple of years now that are rock stars now, but we had to like groom them into that. And you get really good at building systems and processes. And I can say these things from the perspective of in the beginning, I would view this as boring, but now like when I was in the position of a lot of the people listening to this podcast, this was the podcast I was begging for. And I couldn't freaking find it anywhere. And I had to read so many books and talk to so many people to figure this shit out. And I'm like, wait a second, why am I working 120 hours a week now? Like, this makes no sense to me. I thought this entrepreneurship thing was supposed to be financial freedom. Like, what's happening here? Yeah. And so the admin, you can hire them for $4 to $6 an hour. So you can really have them for like $200 a week. And that's where I would begin and flesh out your systems. And then eventually you'll graduate to the point where you need more like in-person or domestic talent. and then you can make the adjustments as necessary. But we do bonus incentives for any salary positions, and those are off of 3 KPIs. Every single position in our company only has 3 KPIs, the rocks that they call in EOS.
That's awesome. I love that too. Mike and I have implemented a lot of that in our business. The KPIs I have seen, it makes the management of people a lot easier because quite frankly, a lot of people don't want to be a leader. They just want to run the company and they don't want to have to deal with the people problems. Well, you have to have KPIs and expectations for your staff, and that's how they get better. One thing I have a question for you on when it comes to the KPIs and it comes to staff, you said you hired virtual to figure it out. And I think the point you're making is they're amazing staff. They're just lower cost, so your mistakes are less costly. Is that kind of what your point there is?
Correct. Yeah, I went through 6, and I'll play devil's advocate here. I went through 6 executive assistants virtually until I landed on the one that I have right now that's been with me for about 30 days, and she crushes it. But I pay her like a salary. She's making about $50,000 a year, US.
Where is she
so
from?
She's from Peru, but she also lived in Japan for 6 years. She's trilingual. She has her master's. So she's like living in Europe, and I'm like, okay, no, you're like talent. I need to find a spot for you.
Perfect.
Yeah. And now it's crushing.
Yeah. And that's something that we've kind of learned the hard way. I think a lot of people do as well, is that you have to cycle through people like that. It's funny. I should recheck these numbers. There was a while back where Dan and I did a show and we were talking about hiring, and we looked, and over the 4 years now we've been working together, we've had over 50 people come through our business that no longer work for us. In 4 years. So that's the churn rate that we've had.
Right.
And I don't know if you've seen this same pattern. Something that I find with like real entrepreneurs, like Aaron Muchstegi, who I know you're good friends with down there in Austin, and there's several other people that are like this. The weird transition almost looks, it's like, it's hard for people that are an employee mindset to understand, but you realize that employees are an expendable resource, as like a business owner. Like, you don't want to view human beings that way. It's kind of against our nature, but like realistically, almost every single person in a business can be replaced if they need to. And if they are not doing what you need them to do, it's honestly not even that hard to find good people right now if you have a good value proposition for them. Right. And that's the key though, is you have to have a good value proposition, because you also get so many people that are saying, like you said before, they want that rock star. Like, I want a rock star that's going to work for no money and only upside in a business that I have no experience growing and no track record of doing successfully. Right.
Yep.
And it's just a funny mindset shift people have to go through.
This is another book that's super awesome, is Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. And I just interviewed Dan on the podcast, and he has a quotient that people can go through. And I forget the actual name of it, but it was to the point where you're writing out like things that, I kind of remember the gist of it. So where it's like things that bring you energy and things that make you money. Mm-hmm. So on the right side of the quadrant, there's 4 sections, and on the left side of the quadrant, it's no energy, and on the right side it's a bunch of energy, and then on the top is a lot of money, bottom is no money. So bottom left corner is the admin corner. So that's going to be all your stuff that's no energy, not revenue producing. And the top is, this is revenue producing, but it zaps my energy. So for me, that's like booking podcasts, scheduling, making the marketing material, making content, stuff like that. Bottom right is, this brings me a bunch of energy but no money. And then that's going to be your hobbies, recreation, wake surfing, golfing, going to seminars, stuff like that. Top right is your zone of genius. That's what makes you a bunch of money and brings you a bunch of energy. So it's like, as a business owner, and you guys, even if you're doing like 1 or 2 properties a freaking month right now, like, you guys can do this stuff. Like, do the test. Take the time to say, what am I really wonderful at in my business? What am I naturally great at? And how can I be exceptional at it? And what do I really struggle with? Yeah. Because knowing that will help you influence your team that you build and the automations.
Yeah. How regularly do you go back and redo these kind of exercises? Because obviously as you grow, things will change on a regular basis.
So can you elaborate the question?
So like looking at your ideal schedule, looking at your org chart, looking at, your projections, things like that. You say 1 year, 3 year timeline. I know you've been through this. You probably had a 1-year timeline and you've blown that out of the water. I think that's a very, very common thing that happens with people when they start going full-time into business. And so I guess how regularly are you redoing the org chart, the planning out your ideal day, looking at kind of like the bigger picture, like you've been talking about, looking at what zaps your energy versus what needs to be done? Because it's going to change as your business grows, as your team grows, as you personally want to do something different, maybe.
Yeah, I think at least at minimum once a year. Like, I don't think this is something I think this is just really sucky operational work that you have to get done to like move to the next thing. And so that's how I viewed it. And then when it comes to like all the rest of this stuff, we do, our quarterly sprints, our 30, 60, 90s. That's what we're really focusing on. So we're ratcheting down every single quarter. We operate like in EOS, and also 12-week year by Brian Moran. It's a wonderful book. That's what we run. So we're running a 12-week year, and then we're taking that 13th week of the quarter, and we're using that to get the goals and goalposts set for the next quarter. So we're looking at our company goals quarterly. We're reviewing them weekly. And then for these exercises, it's more template formation. So it's kind of what everything, like just like the org chart and this type of stuff, maybe once a year, twice a year. I don't think it needs that much attention. What do you guys do?
Yeah. So I guess with us, we've changed a lot over the past couple of years. And the reason I asked this question too is I feel like a lot of people, when they first get into entrepreneurship, they do it like once and
then forget about it.
They forget about it forever. Right.
Yeah.
And so what we kind of just honestly on like a quarterly basis where Dan and I, not even business wise, we decide what we want to do. And we kind of have that dictate everything else. Whereas a lot of people, they tend to go, what does the business look like? And that's almost, to me, more like W-2 mindset, looking at their 5-year goal like it's a fixed track, understanding that you could 10x or 50x next year if you do things a certain way, if you really want to. And so I'm always just curious to see, especially in early phase, how much people are pivoting and changing.
And I would add to that, Mike. So like as an entrepreneur, you mature. And I know Mike and I have made a lot of maturing. I don't know that I know we didn't come into business together, 5 years ago to do what we're doing now. We didn't have the vision. We didn't even have the capacity for this vision. We were like, let's get passive income. We're real estate guys. You know what I mean? And then we kind of just like we're kind of good at this. And we had to kind of figure out what we're good at and where our value add is. And honestly, our value add at this point, I think we would both agree is how to scale businesses. We've taken what in an industry where most people can't get through the glass ceiling, and we've like blown it apart and kind of done several things and realized that buying real estate isn't necessarily our superpower, which we maybe thought it was. It was actually the business around that. And so as you mature, things change. And then Mike and I, and I'll add to this and I'll make the point is like, even this year we do this, like we have the plan. And then by the end of January, we're like, holy shit, we just blew that out of the water. Like what do we do now? And so the challenge becomes is, do you rigidly stick to it because you said that's what you're going to do? Or if you blow it out of the water, do you move the goalpost again?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like, we'll just call a spade. Like, this is just a game that we're all going to play for the rest of our lives. And that's why I wrote my freaking book. I wrote From Passive to Passionate, because passive income is the cool stuff, right? It gets you financially free to now focus on like what's the best bang for my buck I can do with these years that I have on this floating spinning rock through this infinite universe. So it's just like, now it's like, this is when the games that you play and the games that you choose to play that's the most important question that you're ever going to ask. So like the game of marriage, who am I marrying? The game of health, what am I going to do with my body for the rest of my life? And the game of business is, you can't win any of these games. You can't win marriage. You can't win health. You can't win business. So it's like, how do I change the rules of the game? Because you control the rules. How do I twist the rules of the game so that I can enjoy playing this for the rest of my life? So that's what I do. That's what I do with mine. Is I'm just like, dude, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this forever. So what I do is I just try to make the goal as huge as I can, on a 3-year to 5-year time horizon, and be very, very flexible on my approach. So I'm the side of the fence post that's, hey, like, let's set this possible goal and tackle it in 30 different languages, as opposed to, okay, this is 10%, 15% above what we did last quarter. Like, let's try that. So like right now, like Mike, you may have seen the vision that I just recently posted with the Walt Disney mind map, which we can get into in a second. But like now that I'm like, okay, here's how we do 50 million a year. And we just hit our first million. So I'm like, here's how we do 50. And it's like written out like step by step. I'm like, okay, we're going to do this vertical, this vertical, this vertical, one at a time. And that's just fun for me. Like it's really interesting. And what I'm alluding to is Walt Disney created all of his companies on this giant mind map where he has all of them circled and he has all these lines intersecting between each other on this page that he did in 1957. And now that's become the empire that it has today after his death. Yeah. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. And I really like that passionate income, that you've coined. I don't know if you came up with that or you got that from somewhere.
I actually did.
Did you?
That was me.
That's awesome.
That one's me. That's why I wrote it on the book and copyrighted it.
Nice. There you go. Yeah, because that's really valid term, right? And it's something that I don't think people can understand when they're feeling trapped in their W-2 and they don't feel like they're in control of their own time. Is that like people look at entrepreneurs and they think like, well, that person's a workaholic. But like you're really not, because it kind of becomes your identity, and like even when I'm traveling on different places, like one of the coolest things I've ever done for me personally was when I was on a cruise on the Nile in Egypt, right? And I signed closing docs on a flip we made like 47 grand on. Right. Cool. I was like, that's pretty rad. Like I don't care how you feel about working. Like that's a cool experience. And the fact that was completely sort of self-created is so unbelievably fulfilling and is the definition of like passionate income at that point. Right.
Yeah.
And so, I guess getting to that phase, I don't know if it's like a generational thing that we have all being like a little bit younger, but I feel like it's a new thing, but it's starting to catch on. And that's really what you've been able to show and grow with the Action Academy stuff you've been doing, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with like the mind map stuff you're talking about, let's dive into that a little bit. Cause I know that's something that you're super intentional about, promoting and planning out, and you're very open about it. And I think it's an interesting concept.
Yeah, so it just, and what you're talking about with passionate income is really interesting, because the first belief that you need to slay the first dragon you need to slay is that financial freedom is the end of the journey, when the reality is financial freedom is the beginning.
Yeah.
So like life begins at financial freedom. So when you change your thought to that, then you'll say, oh, of course I'm going to just become financially free in 2 to 3 years. I think anybody starting from zero, if they're around the right people, taking the right actions, doing the right stuff, can be financially free within 2 to 3 years from zero. And we've seen it happen thousands of times. It's documented. So you don't need to be emotional about it or wish upon a star. You can literally just look to the thousands of people on freaking YouTube that have documented their journey.
That was a good Disney pun, by the way. I just got to say that.
That's adorable, right? Yeah. Wish upon a star. That wasn't intentional. Shout out Walt. Shout out Walt. Don't sue us. But nah, so it's like, that's the first thing. And then once you realize you're only 2 years away from financial freedom, then you're like, okay, well, what the hell's next? Because you think, oh, I'm going to go sit on a beach now and I'm going to relax and sip Mai Tais. Dude, no, you won't.
Yeah.
Like I did it. I have already lived everyone's dream. So when I left that job, I went and lived in Mykonos, and I lived in the Greek islands for a month. And that was 27 when I did that. So I went and I was in Greece. I did Mykonos, Santorini, and Crete for a month. And then I went for the next 7 months and traveled around Europe. And then when Schengen rule hits, which is 90 days, then I went to Brazil, and I moved in Brazil for a couple of months and did Latin America. So I've already done the thing that people want to do. And I'm here to tell you it's not the answer. So the answer is what could you get paid to do? What work can you get paid to do? What game can you play, to Dan's point, where you would already happily do it for free? And it's the Japanese call it your ikigai. It's the intersection of what the market wants, what the world needs, what you love to do, and what you can get paid for. So when you combine all of this as your ikigai, which is your meaning of life in Japanese. And so that's passionate income. So like for me, that's podcasting, and that's doing what we do in Action Academy. Our entire business model is very ass backwards. It's just give all the stuff away for free and sell the implementation. That's just what we do. I'm like, okay, the best information, like, here you go. Here's how to do it, but you won't. You're not going to. But we'll kick your ass in here if you come. So you asked about the mind map. So how I have it positioned is I have like different corners of the map are different businesses, and I have 7, 8, and 6 circled around them. And I can send y'all a copy of it too to send to people if they want to see it, or I can post it. But it starts with the community. So we start with the podcast. And the podcast, if I wanted to, could be a 6-figure, 7-figure business. It's already been that. I made $167,424 from affiliates in 2022 from the podcast. So it's already been a 6-figure business. Mm-hmm. So then that leads to the community, which is already a 7-figure business, recurring. So then that is the direct business from there. And then we created an events business for international events called Sexton World. And I've done 400,000 in that with one event launch. Mm-hmm. Wow. So I'm like, okay, we just need to do one more event. We're a 7-figure company there. So now granted, that one's not recurring, but it's still going to be a multi-million-dollar company. Mm-hmm. So then from the events business, we said, well, wouldn't it just make sense for us to take this profit and reinvest it into the properties that we're staying at? So then that takes us down to the International Real Estate Fund, which we're like, okay, cool. So in Sexton World, we're also just going to start buying boutique hotels and these luxury properties that we're staying at. That will be an 8-figure business. Then we'll be able to run those as, boutique hotels, event centers, destinations, masterminds, and then also rent them back to ourselves. Mm. So then that's the real estate play. And then you go over to the other left-hand corner, which is the Business and Real Estate Fund, that we can almost just about fully subscribe internally just from our community members. And then you go up to the top left, which is the YouTube and media. So YouTube, I think we can grow that to a 7-figure company through advertisements and sponsorships. Publishing is attached to that, which is another 6-figure business that we're already running from the book that I have today. And then you also have like the email, the newsletter, and then they all funnel into each other, which takes you all the way back down to the bottom where we're going to start vertically integrating smaller service companies into Action Academy. So that'll look like bookkeeping companies, legal companies, social media marketing companies, virtual assistant companies, buying those and absorbing them into our ecosystem. So each one of those, the intention is to buy, 6 to 7 figures of STE on each one of those businesses. And so when you combine them all, they all feed into each other. And then I'll have the operators to choose from my ecosystem within the community. And then I can place those people where they need to be. So it's for Action Academy by Action Academy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's like it's like a mind mapper, but it's like vertically integrating with the core being the,
and travel.
Yeah, travel. Well, it's at your passions, right? It's what I'm seeing this. I'm seeing it. Mike is saying vertically integrated. What I'm seeing is like this pillar, which is like your passion, and then all of these arms coming off that pillar are the things that are working towards that. They all feed into each other, and they all can grow together and scale together.
Yeah, exponentially. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that started with the events business, which became an accidental company where we just spent $102,000 on a weekend for our Cabo event. And while we were there, we stayed in this $20 million, like $12.7 million and an $8.4 million property next door to each other. And I was just like, well, holy crap. Why don't we just figure out how to buy these freaking things? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm like, wouldn't this be freaking cool to own this real estate? And I was like, this is what I want to do. This is really fun for me. And I get to travel and fly first class out there for free and be in those houses. That's a blast, dude.
Yeah, that is awesome. We like our own little KeysCon events we've done. Mike and I have definitely nothing on the scale that you're doing. They're awesome. But I want to make a point of clarification here because you said a lot of stuff. It sounds like a lot of work and a lot of passion. And you talked about financial freedom right before we dove into the mind map. Mm-hmm. I think for a lot of people, financial freedom, at least especially our listeners and just people that have kind of come to the real estate industry in general, they think financial freedom means you have enough passive income to pay your bills and now you're free.
Not work.
It's like passive income though is so hard to truly passive income is so hard. Even Mike and I, we don't have enough real estate to pay our bills. But we have a lot of other sources of income. So could you tell me what financial freedom means to you and what you're talking in the Action Academy?
Yeah, so there's 3 levels of financial freedom. So there's 3 levels of cash flow to clarify that I talk about, which is survive, arrive, and thrive. That's another framework that I created in the book. So survive is how much do you need for your baseline expenses? And again, this is a living, breathing monster, right? It changes with kids when you get married and upgrade the house. So in the beginning, you have survive. How much do I need to pay the bills, make sure that the mortgage is taken care of and there's food on the table? The baseline. So arrive is, okay, now I've got some discretionary. We can go out to eat with the family. We can still go on a trip every once in a while. And now this is more normalcy, right? Thrive is, holy shit, I just replaced my 6-figure income. I've got that $10,000 to $20,000 a month coming in, where I can not only live off of what I'm bringing in, but I can save on it, right? Mm-hmm. So that is my 3 levels of cash flow that we do, because our business is we help 6-figure employees become 7-figure entrepreneurs through commercial real estate and business acquisition. And Mike's actually very active in the group. He comes in and helps a lot. And there's a lot of interlap between our communities where a lot of our guys come and are members of y'all's as well. And they say really, really great things, which is why Mike's one of the only people that we partner with. And he's witnessed me kicking other people out because I'm very stringent on it. So financial freedom for me is having the ability to work on what you want, when you want, where you want, with who you want. And so for me, when I was traveling, I was just lost, floating in this nothingness, blob of nothingness, And here's what happens that nobody talks about, but you guys will understand. So when you're a winner, you enjoy winning. And when you are no longer winning, you are no longer a winner. So when I was traveling, my identity was completely decimated because I'm not doing anything. Like when you're the type of person that goes to the gym, you're that person, you're a healthy person, and when you're not going to the gym, you're like, who am I now? And so that was what I would do. And I was like, dude, like I'm supposed to do something. I just don't know what it is. And what happened for me organically was just getting 30 to 50 messages a week on my Instagram that had maybe 4,000 followers at the time. How are you doing this? How are you traveling? How are you pulling this off? So I said, okay, cool. I'll make an online course. I'll be one of those guys. Spent a month on it, made sure it was a good product, coached 100 people for free. And I was like, let me ask you guys what you need. Like, what do you need help with? And everybody said the same thing. They're like, we'd like the confidence, the clarity, the community, and the capital to scale. So we don't know what we don't know. So we're not taking action. We don't have mentors, capital partners around us. We don't know who to operate with. We don't have clarity on what that looks like or where we're heading. And we don't have people around us. So, and like in capital to pull the deals off. So I was like, okay, let me solve each one of those. Made an online course, made $100,000 in 48 hours from an email that I sent in Florianopolis, Brazil. Then what we did is a month later, I asked everyone what their favorite part of the course was. And they said, the people. So I said, oh shit, we're in the wrong business model. So we scrapped the course and we transitioned it into a community. So those original people got lifetime access to the community, and we made it a recurring mastermind and focused on the people. And that was in 2023. And now we do 1.2 million top line for that business. And so like that was where it began. And now we have people quitting their jobs left and right. And now they're hitting financial freedom. And it's the coolest, most fulfilling thing I've ever done in my life. Yeah, and it's just, and it makes you emotional. Like we had a woman that's 9 months freaking pregnant join because she was like, I've got 8 Airbnbs. And I'll be damned if I'm having somebody raise my kid. Like I need to scale and do these things faster and I'm looking for that community to get this stuff done. And same thing with you guys in your community. Wow.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny. People on the internet, they always kind of like to joke about like, if you're so successful, why do you
sell it?
Why do you have this community?
Exactly.
Yeah. But it's the fulfillment, honestly, right? Like our business is established enough that I don't get excited about doing deals, right? We have 23 closings scheduled for the month of March. It'll be our biggest month ever. I feel nothing about it.
It's expected that we do that.
It's expected, right? It needs to be improving. But when we have like that new person that comes in the group, or that guy who's been struggling for 3 or 4 months and like gets his first deal, like $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 check. And like their world perspective has just changed. Like even just thinking about it, I get like an endorphin rush. Yep. If you have that, we have that happen every single month. There's like, a couple new people that cross that threshold.
Totally.
And that's honestly like the most fulfilling thing that you can do. Right. Like more so than growing your own business, I guess, unless you're like a real narcissist and you just like to see your own numbers going up more so than anything else. But hey,
well, and the other thing too, and Brian, I think you can agree to this, is like when you create a community, like we like our community. Like we want those people, because sometimes you can't have that in your immediate area. So that community for you selfishly too is probably, it's fun. You like being around those people because you're bringing in people that are like you or want to be like you or in that circle of influence. And it just is enjoyable.
Yeah. And for us, we kick people out all the time. So like when you pay, you're not like guaranteeing the spot. Like we'll give you your money back and kick you out if you're not doing anything.
You got to earn it.
And so like, that's what's super fun in ours is like by design, like the whole thing doesn't work anymore as soon as you introduce person A to person B and they don't know if they want to take that call. Mm-hmm. So like, that's when it stops working. So you need to make sure every single person that is in there is on the money. And so that's why we have the policies in place that we do, where it's like, if you're not doing anything and you go through a 2-call application process, and if you're not doing anything in 60 days, you get kicked out.
Yeah. You guys live up to the name, huh? Action Academy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And dude, I tell everybody on the pitch, I'm like, dude, I don't need your freaking money. And that's the whole other thing is I sold all my single family real estate. I'm sitting on cash right now. I've got enough cash today to not work for probably 4 years. Mm-hmm. And live the lifestyle that I'm living and travel and do all the stuff. But like for me, that just serves. I got it in a high yield savings account. I have it sitting there because I could keep my one thing. And it'd be very foolish of me to, I can say that mind map that I just talked about with a certain degree of maturity because I just know so many people that have done that. And I understand that that's a 10-year vision and that's not something I can do I can't do that all together. I have to do it one at a time. Right. So the framework that I do is plant trees, manage orchards. Mm-hmm. So every single property, every single business, every single transaction is like a seed that you plant and you have to protect it as it grows into a sapling. And then eventually it becomes a fruit-bearing tree. And then at that point, it's a David Osborneism, who Mike would know from GoBundance. Mm-hmm. And at that point, when it's a fruit-bearing tree, you're able to leave and plant the next seeds and grow the next trees and then hire somebody to manage the orchard when they're all full grown. So like for me, I do nothing right now besides the core business Action Academy until we're at 3 to 5 million by the end of the year. At that point, I hire a CEO most likely, and I have somebody else that's running the ship while I pivot and transition my attention and energy into growing the international real estate portfolio. Mm-hmm. And then that's where all of a sudden we pull out a raise out of thin air and then we pop up to $20 million of assets again in a year. So that's what we'll do.
Yeah. Love it. Well, awesome, man. Brian, I really appreciate you coming on the show, dude. We are on time. You have a awesome vision. You know, you're obviously very, very good at building out that community, that vision. The growth that you've had in 2 years is really awesome, man. And you have a ton of tips in this episode for how to actually go about that and sort of like get your team excited. Because that's another thing too, I'll definitely give you credit for, like a lot of credit for, is you have built an internal unit of the people that are around you that are 100% bought into your vision, man. You can see that with Caitlin and some of the other people that have really been involved in your community over there. And that's a skill. Like, I don't know if you realize how much of a skill that is, but we talk to a lot of different entrepreneurs and business owners that don't have a single person that is that into the business. And you have like a whole flock of them. So really, really nice job.
Oh, and they'll make millions of dollars too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They'll be perfectly fine. And they know it. Like Caitlin's eating fine. I talk about her on every freaking podcast now. She wants to take her kids. She has 4 kids. She wants to take them to world school all around. And so now I'm like, how much does that cost? $85,000. Cool. Let's give you a raise and figure out how we can make that happen next year.
Yeah. Very cool. Awesome. Well, cool. Well, Brian, I really appreciate you coming on the show, man. For people that want to check out all your stuff, I know we touched on a few different things on the show, but what are the best ways for people to get in contact with you and to hear what you have going on?
Sweet. Yeah. Action Academy podcast. That's where I ask more questions and shut up. I don't talk as much there, ironically. So 5 episodes a week. We've done it across 37 countries, 7 time zones, 589 millionaires, a couple of billionaires. Mike has been on the show multiple times, and it's a wonderful program. We help you replace corporate with cash flow, and we talk about business acquisition and commercial real estate. So check that out. All podcast platforms, the Action Academy podcast. We also wrote a book, From Passive to Passionate: How to Quit Your Job, Grow Your Wealth, Turn Your Passions into Profits. Everything we talked about on this podcast is documented step by step in the book, from the mental models to the vision to the org chart to the hiring and even to profit systems and wholesaling and seller finance. It's all in the book. You can buy that on Amazon. And for the back end business, I don't even pitch that. If you listen to the content first and you like my free stuff, you'll like my paid stuff. So do my free stuff. That's it.
Easy enough. Go check out Action Academy, guys. Really, really good show over there. And he has some very heavy hitters. He's not exaggerating at all. So really awesome content there. And then also shoot Brian a follow on Instagram at Brian Luebben. You have a ton of great content you do there too. I want to give you credit because you are
Thanks,
one of the more prolific Instagrammers I've seen out there. So reach out to him, guys. Check out his stuff. And Brian, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks again for having me.
We'll talk to you next week. See ya.